Okay, I'm thinking it may be time for kickoff here. If we have other folks joining, I'll be sure to admit them as we get rolling. So let me welcome you this morning to Maximizing Opportunities for an Evolving Workforce. I'm Heather Haas, President of Advisa, and we help our clients drive change through leadership development. So we've certainly been having a lot of conversations lately about how the business landscape has changed, the economic landscape has changed, and how that's impacting our clients' strategies and workforces. So before we dive in, as always, a few housekeeping items. You probably may have noticed I am recording the session, and we will be sending you a link to this recording after we wrap up. That email, in addition to the link to the recording, will also include several helpful resources that you can share with others who may not have been able to make the session. In addition, we're going to keep everybody muted while we're kind of sharing the content, but we will open things up at the end. So if you have any questions, you can ask them live at the end, or feel free to use either the chat function or the Q&A function in your Zoom toolbar. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Before I hand it over to Amy McDonald from Cat Sapper Miller Location Advisors, it will be helpful to just hear a little bit from you. So we're going to do a quick poll just to kind of see what your current situation is right now. So if you could just take a minute, in what ways does your company plan to change over the next 3 to 5 years? So you can select any of them that apply. And when I can see the votes coming in, then I can close the poll and we can kind of see where people are, which will be helpful. All right. A couple more minutes. Okay. So let me share the results here. Hopefully you can see that for sure we have people on the call who are adding headcount. Likely that's what caught your attention about this webinar. So that's terrific. We've also got some shift in workforce strategy, as well as some planned investments in technology, infrastructure, equipment, and some physical workspace or configuration changes. So yes, you're in the right place, which is terrific. We're glad you're here. So you know, what we just saw from the poll is you're investing, you're changing, and you're adding people. So as you look at this punch list of some changes and different kind of initiatives you may be taking advantage of right now, this is the perfect time for me to hand it over to Amy McDonald of Cat Sapper Miller Location Advisors. And she's going to really highlight some of the economic incentives that are out there that you may be able to jump on and take advantage of. So go for it, Amy.
All right, thanks, Heather. Hi, everybody. My name's Amy McDonald. As Heather said, I work for KSM Location Advisors. KSM Location Advisors is a part of the broader Cat Sapper and Miller network. So I am technically a part of state and local, KSM state and local tax group. I'm a manager in that group. I originally started my career way back in the day in Minnesota. I'm a CPA. I started at Grant Thornton in multi-state income tax, went on to a public company in their tax department, kind of doing the same thing. And then when I moved here, started in, multi-state income tax and property tax, and then kind of merged into KSM Location Advisors. I didn't know what economic development was or what credits and incentives were, which is what I'm going to talk about today. And it sounds like it's really applicable to people on this webinar. But basically, KSM Location Advisors is the group of the state and local tax group who do the negotiation and compliance assistance for our clients regarding credits and incentives if people are growing or changing. So that's kind of a summary of what we do. I kind of just told you a little bit about us, but we work not just in Indiana, we work in the 48 contiguous states. We've done work everywhere. So, and we've negotiated over 850 million in incentives for our clients. So we do it every day. We love doing it. So I am here. Basically, kind of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the types of incentives. We're going to talk about some common incentives, both at the state and the local level. And then we'll just kind of do a refresher on, now that you've heard about some of these programs, how do you recognize if you qualify or could qualify for incentives? So types of incentives, there's kind of two different buckets that we put incentives into. One is the tax category and one is the non-tax category. In the tax category, as it sounds, tax credits, there's all different types of tax credits. So investment tax credits could be, if someone is installing equipment, machinery, there can be a tax credit related to, a percentage of the cost that you're installing. You could get that back as a credit. Job creation and retention credits are a common type of credit in all states, Indiana included. If you were adding net new jobs, usually full-time jobs, you can potentially get, an annual credit based on the number of new jobs you add. There's training tax credits where if you spend money on training, you could get a credit back from that. Property tax abatement, I'm going to touch on that in a little bit. You could get an exemption or reduction of property tax that you pay depending on, if you're building, if you're expanding, those types of things, installing equipment. And then in the non-tax incentives category, those are things more like grants. So, if an area wants development in a certain area, or, if a city wanted development in a certain part of their city, it's potential that they would maybe offer a land subsidy, maybe a reduced price. Capital grants, or infrastructure assistance, if, people are spending money on infrastructure around them or within their building, or even things that are public related that you would be sharing with the public. There are grants related to, giving an infusion of cash to kind of help with those types of expenses. And then, there are things also like training grants to reduce, the cost of the training expense that you incur to train new and existing employees. You could get a reimbursement of those expenses. Or, there's also things like utility rate reduction. So if you're a big utility user, some companies have what they would call a rider to reduce, your monthly bill. So it's kind of a high level summary of just everything that's kind of out there. Like I said, I'm going to touch on some common state and local ones in the state of Indiana. So I'll start with the state. So Indiana, one of their kind of flagship programs, and with the polling question, it sounds like a lot of people are thinking about adding headcount. So I think this is a super applicable program to a lot of people. It's called the Economic Development for a Growing Economy Tax Credit, or we call it EDGE. So this is a tax credit at the state level. It's refundable, and it usually goes for a period of up to 10 years and is based on new payroll withholding. So moral of the story is, if people are adding net new jobs over time, you can get a credit every year annually for 10 years based on the net new jobs that you created. And this credit is derived by how much net new payroll withholding you create. So I think the nice thing about this credit is it's refundable. And so even if you don't have state tax liability, if you're in a loss or if you're just not paying anything, you can get this as a refund. a lot of other states, I think Indiana separates itself with this program because a lot of other states like Illinois, theirs is non-refundable, so you would have to have tax liability to actually take advantage of the program. This, I think, is very usable for everybody because, you know, whether you're tech and you're in a loss position currently, or whether you do a lot of tax planning and you don't pay tax, you know, maybe you have a lot of depreciation or something, you can receive this credit regardless. So that's, you know, that one of the main programs that we like to, you know, see if we can apply for clients. Another one, this is more based on the investment side of things. It's called the Who's Your Business Investment Tax Credit, or HBI. And this is a non-refundable state level income tax credit. So you do have to have tax liability to take advantage of it. But it is a percentage back on the cost of qualified investment that you make. So it can be up to a period of 2 years. And like I said, it's non-refundable. So if you don't use it, it has a credit carry forward period of 9 years. And this credit is very applicable to projects that maybe are investing in what I would say are movable items. So it's not all investment, it's certain types of investment that this program is geared toward. So it would be very applicable in an instance where maybe somebody is thinking about buying or not buying a new building, building a new building, expanding their current square footage, their current space. So you're, you know, putting infrastructure in, you're building walls, you're, you know, doing more immovable type of investment, or something on the equipment side, something that would be more like heavy machinery. So more on the manufacturing, like heavy machinery side of things. So that's what this is very applicable to. The nice thing about both of these programs is that you can pass the credits to, if you're a pass-through entity, you can pass them to your shareholders, members, partners. You can pass the credit up to them. So, you know, for Edge, it's refundable. You know, if you're a pass-through and you don't pay any tax at the entity level, you can take it at the entity level or you can pass it up. And HBI, same thing, you know, most likely you're not paying tax at the entity level if you're a pass-through, but you can pass it up to your members. So that's a really nice feature. Another one that I wanted to touch on, I'll actually touch on a couple more at the state level. Both of them are training related. Next Level Jobs is an initiative that was brought about by the governor probably a few years ago, and it applies to a lot of different things. So you may, you know, see on the side of the road a next level sign, next level road sign. It also applies to, you know, so maybe some of the funding went to infrastructure. Some of the next level funding is also geared toward workforce development. So the Department of Workforce Development has something called the Next Level Jobs Employer Training Grant. And this is a grant that reimburses companies for training existing and new employees. It is kind of specific in that the expenses that qualify for next level jobs have to be related to the employee gaining some sort of like certification or license. And they do have to, you do kind of have to have a more formal training plan. So it can't necessarily be, you know, like internal training, an hour here, an hour there. It's really more geared toward certification, kind of formal, you know, 40 hours or more type of training classes. And then trainees also have to have a wage increase if they're an existing employee at some point after being trained. But all that being said, if that kind of fits people's fact pattern with the type of training that they do, it's 100% reimbursement up to $5,000 per employee to train them. So it's a great reimbursement rate. As I said, it's for, you know, more so occupational type skills training. And this is a little bit fluid. There isn't necessarily like a standard cap of the program. An example, this is one of the programs that received an infusion of CARES Act funding when all the states were allocated, their CARES funding. This is one of the things that some of Indiana's money went to. And the result of getting an increase in the CARES funding increased the company maximum. So during this last application period, companies could receive up to $100,000 per entity. The window of the CARES funding now has closed, so we're actually going to be now waiting for the next legislative session to see what kind of additional funding this program gets next year. But before the CARES funding came about, the maximum per entity was $50,000. So we kind of end up watching it every single legislative session to see if the rules change, if the type of training that qualifies changes. I think this one has been a little bit more fluid in that they've been using it to, support types of training and eligible occupations that they want to see trained. So it kind of changes over time, but it's a great program, if you do that type of training. So, and then the last one, I didn't put this on the PowerPoint, but the last training grant I wanted to touch on at the Indiana state level is called the Skills Enhancement Fund. And this is another type of training grant that the state has. It's a reimbursement rate of 50% for qualified expenses, and it's also to train new and existing employees. It also, as next level, requires you to have some sort of certification at the end of being trained or some sort of license. The reason I didn't put it on here is because we haven't really been seeing that issued very much lately. It's still out there, but the state, once next level came about, the state kind of went toward next level. And so SEF, I call it SEF, Skills Enhancement Fund, their funding has kind of been decreased over time, and so it's been a little underfunded, but it is another training grant that at some point in the future, if funding comes up for it, is available to apply for. So to move on to the local spectrum, local meaning, county or city. Different places in the state issue different programs. So the local programs really kind of depend on where you're looking, where you're looking on moving to, where you're currently located. And so, it's really a local decision as to what programs they really offer or don't offer. Some people offer a lot of different programs, and some people don't offer any. So that's kind of something when we talk to clients, we figure out where they're going, and we can kind of gauge, oh, you're going to this city, they typically offer tax abatement, or oh, you're going to this city, they really don't offer anything. That's just kind of their MO. So, but to just quickly touch on various local programs. So one of the big programs that Indiana, uses a lot is tax abatement. So this can be applied to both real and personal property tax. So real meaning if you are, involved in new construction, if you're building a new building, or if you're expanding on the square footage of your current space, real property tax abatement could be applicable. Personal, it is, it would be applicable if you are adding or placing in service equipment that's in 4 different categories. That would be manufacturing, research and development, IT equipment, and then logistics and distribution equipment. And property tax abatement is in essence just a reduction of the property tax that you pay on both real and personal. So this can last anywhere from 1 to 10 years. We have sometimes seen it be more than 10, but it's usually 10 or under. And how it works is, if you were, let's say you were to get a 10-year standard tax abatement, your property tax, real or personal, would be reduced on a standard grading scale. So if it was a 10-year standard, it would be, the first year, maybe it would be 100% reduction of your property tax. second year might be a 90% reduction of your property tax, then 80, then 70, and it could kind of go, you know, down by 10% every year potentially. Localities also have a decision as to whether or not they can offer an alternative abatement schedule. So, you know, maybe somebody would say, hey, we're willing to offer you a 5-year property tax abatement at 50% a year. And so localities have kind of been given the leeway to be able to figure out, you know, what grading schedule or what schedule reduction they want to use. And all property tax abatement is really related to the increased assessed value that you create because of your investment. So it really, it doesn't necessarily apply to if somebody was moving but is purchasing an existing building, because that existing building is already on the property tax rolls and you're not necessarily doing anything to increase the assessed value. So it really does apply to, you know, building a new building, which is now on the tax rolls, creating assessed value that way, expanding the square footage because that increases the assessed value of your building, or installing new equipment that wasn't there before. Vacant building deduction. This is another type of abatement, and this is a little bit more scarce and I would say lucrative than just kind of normal property tax abatement. This is involved when you decide to move into a building that has been vacant for a year or longer. So this is kind of their way to, you know, get some activity in buildings that are vacant. And it used to be kind of shorter than regular tax abatement. It used to be like 3 years, 4 years, something like that. They've now made it to where it can go up to 10. And it can be actually 100% abatement of your property tax. So that's why it's more lucrative, because it doesn't necessarily just apply to the increase in assessed value. It applies to all property tax on the building that you decide to move in if it's been vacant for a year or longer. So, and then the last local program that I wanted to touch on is TIF, tax increment financing. This is usually used for infrastructure projects. So, you know, if somebody is maybe creating or building a parking garage, or if maybe somebody is going to be doing a lot of work on, you know, sidewalks or the infrastructure of their property, depending on the scale, TIF can be used for it. If you are you know, either grant or bond, it can go kind of either way depending on the scale of the project. But the short story about it is it can be an infusion of cash that the locality will pay a company upfront to help them with the expenses of that infrastructure project. And then gradually over time, the property tax that gets generated from that, you know, kind of pays back a certain amount of the infusion that you received. And the good thing about TIF is it's used in situations also where they're trying to stimulate development in a very specific area. And so the revenue that's generated from that project also stays within that specific area rather than like being dispersed throughout the county or the city or whatever. So it's an interesting one. It's not used all the time, but it's definitely something that we see. So, and then in terms of kind of the process that we go through for incentives, so they all kind of have a very standard process that you follow. Information gathering phase is where we talk to our clients to see, you know, what type of growth are you having, how much growth are you investing? Are you adding headcount? What are the wages that you're paying? So we do a lot of fact gathering to see what our clients' you know, growth pattern matches with what incentives programs are out there. It may involve location analysis. So if somebody is undecided between, you know, a couple states or a couple cities, you know, we also can kind of give some feedback on either just anecdotally or with statistics, if, you know, job statistics are what somebody's looking for in a specific area. And then meeting with officials, depending on the programs that apply to the growth situation you guys experience, there may be meetings or approval hearings that are involved with getting incentives approved. And then the application process, almost all incentives have an application process. So we, will do that on behalf of our clients based on the information that we gather from them. And then we also negotiate. So there's usually a negotiation period with the state or the locality on, how much should the credit be? How long should the abatement be? What abatement schedule should we use, or what would we like to see? So after negotiation is done, that's usually when incentives are offered and offer and accepted. So, the state or the locality will make an offer saying, this is the abatement we're willing to offer you. This is the credit we're willing to offer you. If you would like to accept, we can move forward in the process. And then the last phase, which I think sometimes people forget about, and I also think is one thing that our team does really well, is ongoing compliance. So after incentives are approved, which is all very exciting, the paperwork starts. And being a group of CPAs and lawyers and prior property tax assessor people, we love compliance. So that's kind of our thing. We, want to make sure that the reports that need to be filed every year are, our clients know the deadlines. You have the forms to file it. We give people instructions on how to complete the reports that, determine what your incentive ends up actually being based on your activity. And, we have a compliance team that follows our clients through the entire length of the agreement. So, for example, if somebody has an edge credit, there's usually a filing that needs to be done every year for 12 years. So we kind of keep track of that for people, help people file it. And then even going to the point of when, your incentive is issued, we usually check it to make sure that we agree with the amount that it came back at. So that's kind of the standard process that we follow. I think one thing I will say about this process is it needs to be at least the approval of incentives, the negotiation, everything before ongoing compliance. The best time to do that is prior to hiring new people, prior to signing an agreement on a piece of land, pulling permits. It's not necessarily something that can be retroactively done. So it kind of needs to be in the thought process in a proactive way. When people are planning their next 3 to 5 years, that's when we would want to start talking to people about, what does your growth look like? Okay, let's apply for them and get them offered before you actually put a shovel in the ground, pull a permit, hire a lot of new people. So standard process there. And I think, now moving on to, I'm going to turn it over to Heather, but, now that, let's say, you get through the incentives process, you hire these people, I think Heather is now going to talk about, how to integrate those people into your workforce, how to, optimize their talents and whatnot. So Heather, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Such helpful information, I think, that Amy has just shared on that bigger picture and some of the economic development opportunities that are out there. And like she said, many of our clients are really starting to think about the next 3 to 5 years. They're starting to think about, how do we move forward? And how do we do that in the most effective, profitable way? So what I'm going to share here on the next couple slides is, now that we kind of have the big picture, we understand the broader economic landscape and the external factors that can help us really grow and evolve. I'm going to zoom in on some of the internal things you can do within your organization to really align the talent that you hope to acquire through some of these incredible incentives. How do you get those folks integrated and aligned with your business strategy, which likely has shifted a bit recently? So let's kind of check in on that. I'm going to launch another poll here. And if you could just take a moment, I'd love for you to think about the future. How would you say your workforce needs to evolve to ensure success? Just take a minute and click that. Hire different people with different skills, reconfigure existing talent, downsize, I'm not sure. Give it a couple more minutes here for people to just make a choice. And maybe you don't, if you don't know, that's fine too. You can click, I'm not sure. Hopefully this webinar helps you think about it. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll here and share results. So definitely several of you on the call, it's about reconfiguring. Definitely the environment has changed, perhaps our strategy has shifted. How do we get people working together in new ways? And then, yeah, some of you are hiring and you need different skill sets as a result. So I'm glad to hear that that's relevant for where you are. And to kind of put this in perspective, those incentives are incredible. The tax abatements financially set you up to be successful, but the other thing that helps your success is your people. And you have an opportunity now as you're evolving and moving forward to really reframe, you know, your people. Yes, it's your workforce. They're also a real competitive advantage if you are very strategic about optimizing talent. And what I mean by that and what we help our clients do is now that you have this strategy in place for how you want to grow, where you're going to grow, and you've clarified the results that you intend to achieve by executing that strategy, it really becomes about the people in the middle. So these happen to be my people, my team at Advisa in front of our physical building located in the Arts and Design District of Carmel, Indiana. And we went through a huge building expansion several years ago. We added on, increased our space so that we could increase our team. And the key here is when you increase your team, and when your business strategy shifts, your people plan needs to change too. So what I'm showing here is a process that we call talent optimization, and we're able to help our clients really move through these 4 phases to get all of those incredible people aligned and set up to execute the strategy. So it starts with design. How do you build teams and develop those teams so that they can leverage their strengths to execute their objectives? So we have an array of tools and training and analytics where we can help leaders redesign, reconfigure, like we saw in the poll. Many of you are reconfiguring an existing workforce. We bring some objectivity and some data visualization tools to the table to help you really see how does this group's strengths line up with the type of work that we're asking them to do. So once you've been strategic and very thoughtful about designing effective teams, that usually leads you to identify some talent gaps or identify some new talent, new skills. That was the other thing that you said. We do need to hire some different skill sets to be able to deliver on our strategy. So in the hiring phase of talent optimization, you're using tools to very objectively define the kinds of critical behaviors for success in every role in your organization. Then you're able to assess candidates and gather objective information about their strengths and get a picture of job fit and really see objectively, so that it's not, you know, which candidate do you like better, but you can get an objective picture of how do these new employees that we can now afford, how do they fit to the role and the work that we need done. So once you've staffed up and you've gotten people in the right seats on the bus, now it's time to really empower your leaders and managers to coach and engage all of those folks. because as hard as you worked to find them and get them in the door, the next challenge is how do we keep them and grow them and help them reach their potential. So we bring a variety of training and tools and, again, analytics to empower managers to really understand who do I have on this team and how do I develop them to get the best results. So that's kind of the day-to-day, how do leaders and managers engage with their team. But then on an annual basis, I'm sure many of you already are measuring engagement across the organization or taking the pulse of the employee experience. So diagnose is the phase of talent optimization where we can do an employee engagement survey, and we can bring that data to bear as you're doing your future workforce planning for the next year and starting to think about how do we need to be intentional about our culture and our people strategy given the feedback that we received from our incumbent employees. So this process of design, hire, inspire performance, and then diagnose the employee experience is a really powerful way to achieve that alignment between the business strategy and the people that you need to execute the work for success. So as we just kind of looked at that poll, and you brought top of mind, how does your workforce need to evolve? That evolution, typically in our experience, leaders need some tools and training to be able to help their workforce make that change and begin to engage and communicate and behave in new ways to be successful. So let's focus on the hiring, because hiring smarter, you have a great opportunity to really dial this in given the incentives that are available out there. So we would encourage you to take the opportunity to really think about the roles that you need to fill. We are an elite certified partner of the Predictive Index, which is a talent optimization software platform. And so one of the exercises that we take our clients through is what we call a job assessment. And we have tools in the system that will help a leader benchmark the critical behaviors for success in a role. That objective definition of how we need someone to behave in a machine operator role, or in a CPA role, or in a project management role, fill in the blank, clarifying that kind of behavior is so helpful then when we go to run candidates through the interview process. So the next thing that we help our clients do is collect data, behavioral and cognitive data about qualified candidates who apply for their open positions. That data in the system comes together in a way that you can get a really accurate and quick snapshot of how the candidates that you've surveyed and put through your applicant process, how do they stack up relative to the job requirements that you've defined? How do they match? And this opportunity to really take a more structured process for prioritizing which candidates are best fit before you even meet them, it reduces bias. And it really helps you stay very objective in terms of people's fit to the role instead of comparing candidates to each other. So this is an example of an interview guide that our clients could create in the system once they've benchmarked a job, once they've surveyed candidates. Now you can select a job, select a person, create an interview guide, and now you have data and a really helpful way to kind of navigate the interview with consistent, structured questions to discern candidate fit to the role. And then finally, once you select Jordy, that's who's pictured here, if he's the right fit, you also know when you onboard him and bring him into the organization, how to set him up for success from day one. Predictive Index has a behavioral assessment that measures motivating needs that are present in all people. So whether an individual has a need for control or harmony recognition, variety, clarity, freedom. We're all wired up differently. But if we know what those needs are, that's what helps us predict behavior on the job. Because people behave in ways that meet their inherent motivating needs. So some jobs require independence, persuasiveness, analytical skills, patience, etc. To know this information on day one when Jordy shows up for work, that manager is now empowered to inspire performance, coach in a very personal way so that Jordy can be successful and get his needs met at work. And we know from research and from our own 34 years of experience working with companies, when people's motivating needs are met at work, either by the job itself, by the work that they do, or by their manager, their team, and their work environment, performance goes up. So all of this that I've shared here about hiring smarter, raising your game, it's all building toward finding the right people and engaging them in a way that they can perform. So we've looked at an individual relative to a job. Most individuals end up on a team. And so this screenshot here from our software enables a manager to first focus on the work. What is this team responsible for achieving? Is it about creating new things to bring new products and services to the market, keeping energy and excitement high? Is it about, what do we need them to do? Deliver a new product, launch something, create something, track something, etc. Once we can clarify what are the most important things for this team to achieve, it enables us to de-risk execution. Because what you can see here is you're able to see this team's strengths and potential blind spots relative to the work. So at the top right there, that's information about the people, the team, and it's based on their behavioral data that we collected. For some, when they were in the interview process, for incumbents, it's part of what they take so that the organization has this level of people intelligence to make decisions. When we really start to focus on team identity, you can see those 4 blue little pins there in that top right quadrant that we've labeled innovation and agility. That 4-quadrant framework gives us a language to understand how people and work marry up. So the purple bands reflect the strategic emphasis. There's an assessment that a team can take to really capture what's the strategic intent of our work objectives. Are we being innovative and agile and taking risks? As this team is, you can see this is an exploring team. These people are daring, risk-oriented, driven, and entrepreneurial. These people want to get after it, and they don't want to be held back by a lot of details, process, and procedure. Their strategy, if you look at the bottom right quadrant represented by the 3 purple bands, that shows that a large emphasis in the next 12 months for this team is what we call pathfinding. This organization needs this team to add customers while being open to innovation and partnerships. That results and discipline, that pathfinding strategy reflects the work objectives. We need this team to get after it, create new business, capture market share from the competitors, get a new product quickly out to the market to outpace the competition. And we need to be disciplined and relentless about our efforts to accomplish those things. So that's what we see here now. We see the people with the little blue pins that are very exploring and entrepreneurial, excellent. And then we see the work. We need discipline. We need follow through. We need results. So the tension here for this team that the people analytics bring to the surface is how are we going to help these 4 people who are kind of mavericks about how they do their work? That's where their strengths lie. How are we going to help them follow through and be disciplined? What systems can we put in place? Are there any complementary folks in the organization that we can pull in? And as the leader or manager of this team, how might I bring this tension right to the surface and challenge my team and get my team involved in how are we going to execute, guys? We know we're really good at taking risks and getting things started, but what the organization needs us to do is not only get it started, but get it over the goal line. So this view here where you can see people and the type of work that they're being asked to do is pretty groundbreaking. And it's exciting that in our predictive index platform, we can equip leaders with this kind of insight and then follow on with additional training to really help them de-risk execution as their teams, as their goals change, and as that workforce evolves over time. So with that, I want to bring us back to kind of where we started, which was, are you growing? You know, are you going to be adding at least 20 to 25 net new jobs in the next 3 to 5 years? Do you have an average wage of at least $15 an hour? Are you making those capital investments? New building, new equipment, expanding a location, planning a move? Are you considering expanding into another state? So remember, the big picture and the economic incentives are out there. And once you zero in on where you're headed in the next 3 to 5 years, and Amy and her team can help you really get the most of those economic incentives that are out there, we can help you then, once you get those people on board and you make these shifts, we can help you really optimize that workforce and stay nimble over time to continue to make changes and help teams execute over the long term. So at this time, we've shared a lot of information, and I hope it's been really interesting and relevant for you, but we recognize that you may have some questions. So there's one here in the chat. There's one that's been submitted here. Someone has asked, can we talk more about the benefits, both financial and otherwise, of investing in current employees? So should this be a one-time investment, ongoing, annually? So I'll take a stab at this first, Amy, and then maybe you can tag in. You know, as I said at the beginning, I think your people are your competitive advantage. You can do all the right things with operational planning and tax abatements and incentives. That's an incredible start, but you still have to get human beings to execute and perform at a high level over time to achieve those results. So in my experience, companies who are investing in training and development, whether they're paying for it out of pocket, or many of our clients have used that, you know, next level money, those CEF incentives, however you're paying for it, what employees want is they want to grow and they want to achieve at a high level. So the workforce has really evolved and changed. Many of you have probably already experienced kind of that generational shift. Younger members of the workforce want and crave development. It's extremely motivating, and in our experience, it really pays dividends in terms of engagement that impacts customer loyalty, which ultimately impacts results. So I don't know if you would add anything onto that, Amy?
Yeah, I think since I'm coming at it just from, you know, a financial incentive perspective right now, you know, investing over time in employees, I definitely agree, Heather, that, you know, people training ends up being one of those things that sometimes you feel like maybe you can't quantify the benefits right away, but pay off in the end. From a incentive perspective, you can definitely use programs over and over again, depending on, you know, how much training you do. Maybe you can apply for multiple training grants. You know, if you're continuing to grow, at least in Indiana, incentives are something that you can apply for multiple times if you are meeting certain fact patterns. So.
Excellent. We have a few more folks still online. This is a great time to get some free consulting. So feel free to ask whatever question you may have, and we're happy to field that. And we'd love to hear your voices if you want to come off mute. I know Rob Wineland, I can see you on there. If you're willing to come off mute, I would love to hear a little bit more about the kind of growth that you're anticipating in the next 3 to 5 years. Let's see if he's willing.
Well, I wouldn't.
Yeah, we can hear you. So what are you thinking your organization is going to experience here in the near term?
I think the challenge, the question that I have is how much attention do the smaller organizations get when it's looked to for these types of incentives, but you show the dollars per hour of what the jobs are. These are high-end jobs that are averaging around 100K a year. And over the next, 3 to 5 years, we probably will be adding, between 10 and 20 positions if we remain focused in the Indiana market. So how does, I understand the interest to have thousands of jobs and all those types of things, but where does that smaller business fit into this whole strategy?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, we work with companies of all sizes who are growing at all different scales. So, I actually work with a lot of tech companies who maybe are growing, for them, because right now they have 0 people, they're a 25-person increase for them is, huge. And we definitely work on just as many of those projects as we do, larger ones where maybe they are adding a couple hundred jobs. So I think the state is open to and appreciates all types of job growth and all types of position titles. I would say, from our perspective, if someone's thinking about, maybe adding 10 jobs over 5 years, I think we usually say 20 to 25 is a rule of thumb, just because maybe the time that people put into the application and approval process, maybe something like a 10-person or a 5-person increase, it may not be worth the time to apply and do the annual reporting for the 10 years or 12 years or whatever it is, with the credit that you would get. So that's why we have that rule of thumb in place, but that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody couldn't do it. So.
It's a good question. So are you also saying, Amy, that on that slide that had those triggers for the incentives, do you have to meet all of those criteria or some of the criteria?
So you don't necessarily have to meet all of them. Job growth is definitely a key component to incentives. The hourly wage, that's kind of changed over time, just with, policies and people's preferences, stuff that's going on politically, so that's kind of like a moving target. But as a rule of thumb, at or above $15 an hour, ideally around the county average wage. Those are appealing, projects to the state if they're above that. You don't necessarily have to be making a huge, big capital investment to qualify for a hiring credit, and you don't necessarily have to be adding 150 to 100 jobs to qualify for tax abatement, because they're based on different types of things. So that's why it's important for us, I think, to talk to clients. And if any of you out there, even if you don't ask a question here, feel free to shoot me an email or call me, because really having that information gathering call, you know, the discovery phase of what the growth really is going to be or not be is important, because we can kind of tell people what, you know, is kind of on the horizon when maybe you wouldn't think that you would qualify for something, you know.
Yeah, and we've had clients use some of these training grants in many cases to pay the type of training that I was describing, where we're upskilling leaders, we're giving them certifications. You know, that if you have a partner like Amy or us, or even someone internal on your team who can kind of run point on coordinating that grant writing process, you know, we can come alongside you and help you push that through, such that the training investments, at least, even if you're not adding, you know, 200 jobs, you might only be adding 10, but wouldn't it be amazing to be able to upskill those 10 right out of the gate? So.
Right, and next level jobs, you know, that doesn't really require any growth, you know, so it really does depend on what your project is, to determine, you know, what you know, programs you would qualify for. Because yeah, that next level, you could apply for that now or whenever the application period is open and not really even be expanding. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, unless there are any final questions, it was wonderful to see some of you join, and it's been great to have Amy on here sharing this expertise. We are going to, as I mentioned at the beginning, share the recording of this, and the reason we do that is we know that people are pretty webinared out by this time of everyone working virtually, but where you think the information was valuable, send it to someone who would benefit from knowing it, and you can even flag them, you know, where to fast forward in the recording to hear. So thanks again so much. We'll be following up via email, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.